Today on Know the Truth, Philip de Courcy considers the power of godly leaders.
Everything starts at the top. And that's why the church needs to be led by men whose lives are compelling by the integrity of their lives, the authenticity of their love, the quality of their homes, the potency of their theology, and the clarity of their leadership. It all starts at the top. Success flows downward from leadership.
Strong leadership matters everywhere, whether in government, the corporate world, or most importantly, in our churches. But how do we recognize leaders who are truly worth following? And how can we protect our communities from those who fall short? That's what we're exploring today on Know the Truth with Philip de Courcy. In this message, we continue our series in the book of Titus, where the Apostle Paul lays out clear biblical qualifications for godly church leadership. So now, let's join Philip de Courcy as he delivers today's message. It's titled, It Starts at the Top.
Well, let's take our Bibles and turn to Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. We're in a series called Doing Good. And the message is called It Starts at the Top. Because these are verses that address the need for well-qualified elders to give leadership to God's people. Follow along. Titus 1, verses 5 through 9. For this reason, I, that's Paul, left you, that's Titus, in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking, and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. If a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. For a bishop must be blameless, as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just, holy, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine to both exhort and convince those who contradict. It starts at the top, Titus 1, verses 5 through 9. In the field of medicine, in the arena of sports, in the world of business, in the halls of government, in the theater of war, you know, and I know, that we need well-qualified people serving and leading. In any of these arenas, in any of these disciplines, excellence, efficiency, effectiveness requires the best person for the job at hand. In fact, talking about the field of medicine, I like the story that comes out of a prestigious medical school where some of the students were beginning to kind of grumble about the fact that some of their required courses had no direct relevance to their field of study. In fact, one of the students got so bold as to go to one of the professors and challenge the curriculum and its requirements. And he said, you know what? Why do we do courses like physics when it has nothing to do with our field of study? Well, the professor looked at this student and he said, because the study of physics saves lives. The student was rather stumped by that and said, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. What has physics got to do with my field of study in the area of medicine? Well, with a sly grin, the professor patiently replied, because studying physics ensures that lazy and ignorant people don't become doctors. It's a good point. Every vocation, every field of study, every arena of life where service is rendered or leadership is exercised requires prerequisites, requires certain proficiencies. And I would suggest to you this morning that church ministry, and especially pastoral leadership, is no different. That's why in the New Testament, in the very passage we're going to come and look at this morning, there are some fundamental and foundational requirements that are set forth for any man who would occupy the pastoral office. Here we've got a criteria by which to measure if a man is well qualified to exercise leadership over the church. This is one of several passages that outline these fundamental prerequisites. If you want to know what the other passages are, it's 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 to 7. It's Acts chapter 20, verses 28 to 38, and 1 Peter 5, verses 1 to 4. You know this, from sports to the military, to work, to family. Everything rises and falls on the level of leadership. Everything starts at the top. And that's why the church needs to be led by men whose lives are compelling. Men who can indeed compel commitment and involvement from God's people by the integrity of their lives, the authenticity of their love, the quality of their homes, the potency of their theology, and the clarity of their leadership. It all starts at the top. Success flows downward from leadership. So let's come and look at this passage as Paul outlines some of the criteria by which you and I can measure those who ought to occupy the pastoral office. Now let's set the text in its context, something we do on a regular basis here at Kindred. We're looking at verses 5 through 9. We have already considered verses 1 through 4, and shortly we will look at verses 10 through 16. And the verses we're looking at this morning and next Sunday are kind of sandwiched in between these two ideas. You've got the good example of Paul, and you've got the bad example of false teachers. False teachers who are talkers and deceivers, insubordinate, whose mouths need to be stopped. Verse 10, they subvert whole households, teaching those things which ought not to be taught. So here's what Paul is saying to Titus. You know what? I need you to follow my example, and I need you to reject their example, and I need you to be an example. And since you're only one person, here's what you need to do. You need to handpick qualified men who will do across the island of Crete what I'm asking you to do. That's the context. Titus, follow my example, reject the example of false teachers, and get other men on board who will do the same thing across the churches in Crete. If you remember, we've called this series Doing Good. And if you remember verses 1 through 4, we said this: doing good is the product of the work of the word. Well, I've got a second thought for you as we work our way through this little poignant epistle. Doing good requires following good leaders. You want to live a life of good works? You want to develop a life of goodness and godliness that impacts your culture? Well, then follow good leaders who will leave you a good example, who will teach you doctrine and point you towards Christ. So let's begin to look at this passage here. One, an outline. We've got the absence of pastoral leadership. We've got the appointment of pastoral leadership, and we've got the assessment of pastoral leadership. Let's see how far we go. Let's look at the absence of pastoral leadership. Let's make no mistake about the fact that Paul didn't dump Titus on Crete. There was a purpose to him being left on that island. He was there to protect and prosper the gospel. Here's what Paul says: for this reason I left you. Implication, I was once with you there, but I left you there. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you might set in order the things that are lacking and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. Paul's indicating that there was an absence of pastoral leadership among the churches of that island. Homer, the Greek poet, tells us that the island of Crete was made up of 100 cities. This is a good-sized island. If you remember back to our introduction from Acts 2, verse 11, we made an argument that many of these churches were started by Jewish converts to Christianity returning from the day of Pentecost. That's one source of the emergence of these churches. Another source was Paul and Titus directly, perhaps, founded some of these churches while Paul was on the island, but now he has left the island. Titus has been left to do what hasn't been done, to finish what is left unfinished. So that's the absence of leadership. Two things come out of it. Number one, the correcting of church life. And number two, the selecting of church leaders. That's what Titus has been left to do. The first thing you'll see, that he is to set in order the things that are lacking. Now, those are mixed metaphors, so let's pick it apart. He's to set in order things. Things in general. From opposing the opponents of the gospel, to instructing the faithful, to encouraging the discouraged, to promoting godliness, to instilling eschatological hope in the rapture of the church and the blessed hope of the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior. Set things in order. By the way, that's a Greek word that gives us our words orthopedics and orthodontics. It means to set things straight. What does an orthopedic surgeon do? He sets bones straight. What does an orthodontic dentist do? He sets teeth straight. That's why I try to remind my girls, if they've got a frown on their face, hey girls, I need to see that $4,000 smile. Okay? That's our word, orthodontics, orthopedics. It means to set things straight, put them in order. And that's speaking in general, although that which was left unfinished is clearly the appointment of elders in every city. That's what Titus has to finish. That was what was left unfinished. That's what was left incomplete. Which would a reminder, by the way, the work of the ministry is never done. We're always fixing, we're always finishing stuff. That's why one of the Puritans said of pastors and church leaders, the minister will never find his work the next day as does the carpenter. What does he mean by that? Well, typically the carpenter, if he's working maybe on a cabinet or a piece of furniture, he knocks off about 6 o'clock in the day and goes home. When he gets back to his workshop in the morning, there it is, exactly as he left it, because it's inanimate, just sits there, waiting to be worked on. But that's not true of pastoring. The devil meddles in God's work. God's people take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The minister never finds his work as does the carpenter. And that's true. Titus, can you straighten out a few things? And can you finish what was not finished by appointing elders in the cities? I want you to be part of the next step in the maturing of Christians on the island of Crete. Because the Great Commission isn't just about making decisions, it's about making disciples. And that's hard work. Now I want to make an application and move on. Titus teaches us that the consolidation of church life and the Christian life is a matter of importance. Hey, Titus, we didn't get it all done. Now, we got some things, we achieved some things. People got saved, we got baptized, we got them into some accountability group. We started teaching them the Word of God, but there's some things that are not finished yet. We need to put good leaders over them. We need to get them to another level of maturity. We've got to help them think through how they're going to be salt and light in their culture. So Paul is saying to Titus, you know what? Consolidate the church, consolidate Christians, help them to go on to the next natural step. It's a good reminder, we all need to protect our progression. It's so easy to go backwards in the Christian life. Have you noticed that, by the way? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Have you ever noticed, have you woken up to the fact how shockingly ill-disciplined you and I can be? We can sin in ways that surprise us. On a given day after a day before that was so good. It's a battle. It's something you're constantly working at. You can go forward, and if you don't consolidate that and fix what's lacking to go forward some more, you'll go backwards. Isn't that what Galatians is all about? Paul says, I'm shocked. You guys are so soon removed from the gospel. I'm going and I'm hearing you're abandoning the gospel. Galatians 5:7, you did run well, but who did hinder you? What about the book of Hebrews? That's all about the danger of going backwards, of drifting. Hebrews 2 verse 1. Pay attention, give diligence to this, lest you drift. That's a nautical term. If you have a boat, and you tie it to the jetty or to the quayside. If you don't tie that knot well, the mooring becomes loose and all of a sudden the boat begins to drift and the tide carries it out to sea. That's our word. Don't drift. Don't become unmoored. So easy to get carried away from Christ. Listen, there's no such a thing as marking time or trading water in your pursuit of Christ. Just root that down. You don't get a day off. A day off is a day in which you go backwards, lose ground. I love that little phrase, fix what is lacking. I wrote that down to myself. I've been thinking about it. What is lacking in my life? What's lacking in my walk with Christ, my prayer life, my disciplines? What is lacking in my marriage, my love for my wife, my parenting? What is lacking in my personal development? What is lacking in my physical or mental health or strength? Got to ask yourself that all the time. What's lacking, and then determine what's lacking and fix it. There's no time to waste. Ground cannot be lost. What does Jesus say in one of the churches in Asia in Revelation 3 verse 2? Strengthen those things that remain and are ready to die. How challenging is that? Our prayer life can die. Our commitment to studying the Bible can die. Our passion for souls can die. Our love for Jesus and worship can die. Got to work at it. Didn't Tozer talk about the hunger of the wilderness? Listen to this. The neglected heart will soon be a heart overrun with worldly thoughts. The neglected life will soon become a moral chaos. The church that is not jealously protected by mighty intercession and sacrificial labors will become, before long, the abode of every evil bird and the hiding place for unsuspected corruption. The creeping wilderness will soon take over that church that trusts in its own strength and forgets to watch and pray. You get his analogy? I mean, we've all seen it in our own gardens. Leave your garden unattended, and what does it become? A wilderness. Wildernesses are hungry. They'll spread unless you impede them, unless you cultivate the ground that you have, watering it and tending it and weeding it. It's the same in the spiritual life. One of my favorite Bible teachers is my mother. Not that she's ever formally taught a Bible study or preached from a pulpit. But she holds court in her kitchen. And when I was a young Christian, I loved to go as she held court. And as I would listen to her wisdom as I negotiated for a piece of her sponge cake. And there she would hold court. And as I would stick my hand in the mixing bowl or whatever the case might be, she would say, "Now, Philip, remember." One day she said, "Philip, remember. Why don't you remember something my old Pastor Hugh Ward taught us at Great Victoria Street Baptist Church in Belfast. He said to us in our early days as Christians, the Christian life is like riding a bike uphill without brakes. You're either going up or you're coming down, forward or backward. Those are the choices. It's a good word, cake or no cake. It's a good word. And it's stayed with me my whole life. I'm either going forward or I'm going backwards. There's no treading water, no day off. You can't consolidate your Christian life and walk away from it for several hours and think it's going to be the same when you get back. Here's another thing. Not only do you have the correcting of church life, you have the selecting of church leaders. One of the things that was left unfinished by Paul, and he's left Titus to complete it, is the appointment of elders in every city. Titus was to organize the church for future impact. Elders had not yet been appointed in every city, and that was an apostolic pattern. Write it down, look it up later. Acts 14:23, where we read that wherever the other apostles went, they appointed elders in every city. That's a New Testament pattern. Every New Testament church worth its name is a church that has godly elders at the forefront leading the charge. Now, why would that have been left unfinished? Got a question, Paul, why didn't you do it when you were there? Well, I would assume at least one answer to that question might be time had to go by. Because these Converts were back from the day of Pentecost, but they're novices. And if Paul and Titus had directly seen people come to faith in Jesus Christ, none of them were ready-made leaders. They needed time to mature. Because one of Paul's benchmarks, according to 1 Timothy 3, verse 7, is what? When it comes to an elder, a bishop, or an overseer, all interchangeable terms, he's not to be a novice. He's not to be a new Christian or a recent convert. They're enthusiastic. They're gang-ho for Jesus. We love that about new converts. Don't pour cold water on them, by the way, ever. Let them be. Let them be a little reckless. They'll find their feet. You nurture them. But they're not ready for prime time. Time's got to go by. And over time, they'll mature, and you'll be able to look at a congregation and see a man who loves his wife. You'll see a man who's got his house in order. You'll see a man that's got a good reputation in the community. You'll look at that man, and he's governed by Jesus Christ as Lord, and his life is marked by self-control and godliness. He's your guy. So time had to go by. Isn't that what Paul says also in 1 Timothy 5, 17 to 22? Lay hands on no man suddenly. That doesn't mean you can't go up behind someone at a Bible study and put your hand on their shoulder. That's not what that verse is about. It's about laying hands in terms of setting leaders apart. And Paul's saying, don't do that quickly. Because some people are not ready for it. And frankly, life will teach you this. And this is something we don't often think about. The presence of a bad leader does more damage to a church than the absence of a good leader. Better to wait. Better to want what you don't have than to not want what you do have in a bad leader. I think it was Alistair Begg spoke of a Northern Irish friend of his by the name of T.S. Mooney. He was 70 years old. He was a Presbyterian elder up in Londonderry in Northern Ireland, and he never married. And one day Alistair asked T.S. Mooney why he had never married, and he had this classic response: the desirable was unattainable, and the attainable was undesirable. That's why he was a bachelor. And if you kind of apply that to marriage and ministry, the point is what? Don't rush into marriage. Rather want what you don't have than not want what you do have. Same with ministry. Wait for a godly man to rise up, having been produced by God the Holy Spirit.
We're learning how to apply God's truth to the important area of church leadership. You're listening to Philip Courcy here on Know the Truth. Together we've been exploring the vital role of the church, not just in shaping the life of the believer, but in making a difference in the world. If you'd like to hear this message again or share it with a friend, you can visit ktt.org. You can also subscribe to the Know the Truth podcast in your favorite podcast app. And don't forget, you can find even more inspiring Bible teaching by checking out Pastor Philip's weekly devotional, So True. Each message is crafted to strengthen your faith, encourage your heart, and keep you anchored in God's unchanging truth all week long. You can access the devotional online at ktt.org. At Know the Truth, our mission is to proclaim the life-changing gospel through teaching that is clear, heartfelt, and practical. We're passionate about encouraging believers, equipping them to serve in their churches and communities, and inspiring them to share Christ's message wherever God leads. If Pastor Philip's messages have strengthened your faith, we invite you to partner with us. When you give a gift this month to support Know the Truth, we'll say thanks by sending you Emil E.Z. Zwain's Fight Like a Man, a bold biblical battle plan for personal purity. The battle for holiness is intense, and sexual immorality has harmed too many men, families, and our witness. But together, we can equip the next generation to stand strong and pursue purity. To give and request your copy of the book, Fight Like a Man, call 888-644-8811. That's 888-644-8811. Or go to ktt.org. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for more Bible teaching from Pastor Philip Courcy here on Know the Truth. Today's program was produced and sponsored by Know the Truth Incorporated. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."